Good evening, everybody. This is the May 14th meeting of the Durham Agricultural Commission. And we have a full agenda tonight, and we thank Michael Barrett, the town planner, for joining us. And because we have a new member, an old but new member with us, we'll go around and do introductions. And James, if you could start, please.
I'm James Bubar, a visiting member from the planning board. And
An alumnus
an alumnus, one
of
of
the Ag Commission.
original, one of the, I wouldn't say founders, but on the original agricultural commission.
I forget the email, so I beg your pardon, but James, you be with us on a regular basis, or just,
Yes, I am.
so does that mean you're,
Creek don't rise.
yeah, but you're not
Hi,
really
Jim.
a
We just
council
started.
rep, you're more of a
I'm a planning board representative.
planning board.
We've never had a planning board
That's
representative.
what I'm trying to sort out here,
Yeah,
okay.
so that's very exciting. Thank you.
Join me here.
Yeah, sorry, Jim.
Suzanne McDonald.
James, I'm just a pretty face typist for this group, so
I
it's,
understand that role.
yeah, okay. So,
I don't know. Okay.
Go ahead.
Ellen Correllitz.
David Potter. Dan Winans.
Teresa Walker.
Renee Shula.
Ray LaRoche.
Lee Alexander,
John Carroll.
Alberto Manalo.
Jim Lawson.
Thank you, everybody. So, Michael, we had you first on the agenda with the hope that we can get you
Well, thank you.
out the door sooner. So, I think you guys also saw that email, and I typed up the table of uses, the work we had done at our April meeting. And the notes that I'd made to myself were that I was going to try and take this and build more of a narrative with the memo that Michael had crafted for us, which was a discussion of how agriculture and the state definition of ag was already incorporated into town land use regulations. But I didn't get too far with that because I thought that it would be just best for us to stop with the table of uses and see what Michael thought of it, and then plot our next course. And Michael and I had an email conversation this afternoon, and I think he's advised us wisely that we should provide the planning board with just some information and an update of what we're doing sooner rather than later. And we're looking at the June.
Well, I actually, I looked at the count, Teresa and I talked about the next available planning board meeting is in a month on June 13th. And we thought it would be helpful to kind of give an overview to the planning board before actually going too far with the ordinance. And Paul Rasmussen, the chair, had asked that some kind of update to the planning board early in the process. Actually, as I looked at the schedule, here's a thought, here's an idea. We could talk about this, could give you a draft, some kind of very rough draft at your next meeting on June 11th. And then you could, you'd have a chance to look at that, and then if we went to the June 27th planning board meeting, that would give time to, for the commission to kind of review that, make any changes, and then we could get it to the planning board in advance of their June 27th meeting.
Would this be just a discussion on what we were hoping to do, or would this be a hearing on a draft?
No,
Yeah.
I think it would be a broad discussion.
I think
Yeah.
it's what we would like, yes. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you.
Does that sound like a
Sounds
good
like a plan.
timeline?
Yeah. So, we'll jump right into it. So this is the table of uses, Michael, how we kind of envisioned it, and we did, probably what you and Audrey and Renee and I talked about that first time a few months back when we met, which is we took the state definition of agriculture and all those particular activities, and then we went across on the zoning districts to see where we felt there was an opportunity for those activities to be successful, in town. So, as we've had this conversation before, that first item, the cultivation of crops and tillage by state law is allowed in all zones. A town cannot do that, so we would turn that to a P, right? And then we had a lot of discussions about the other categories, and what we haven't done in this table is struck out where agriculture is addressed in the current table of uses. Because it's using the kind of the definitions that we probably want to get rid of, right? Like
Yeah,
that
I think
division
you
of
wanna-
commercial agriculture or accessory agriculture, things that don't tie back to the state definition.
Yeah, I think you want to take almost a zero-based approach.
Yes,
Other than the recent amendments that you did about goats and poultry, which are great, I think everything else, you probably can just ignore it and start from scratch and build up a new ordinance based on your proposal.
so what did you think of this?
Oh, I think it's great in that you did what you needed to do.
Right,
So that was great. That's what we had talked about, was doing a matrix of every use by the state definition and then all the zoning categories. So that's what you needed to do. That's great. So I think the challenge now is how to craft an ordinance, which is a big project. And it's complicated, what to do with the best management practices is the key thing, and what to pull out of that, what kind of specific standards you can incorporate and want to incorporate, what kind of reference to the BNPs, because they're difficult to reference for zoning. So, but that's, that's a technical process. I mean, we can get that done, figure that out. And then, so I think if you give an overview to the planning board in June, I'm sure you'll get all kinds of feedback, and the board will see what they want to do. I mean, it could just be a discussion of one meeting, or they may say, they may have I mean, I think you're going to have pushback, for sure. And,
on what, and
well,
what in particular?
I mean, I'm sure there will be, use of livestock, it's a proposal that's pretty strongly, pro-agriculture, and that's your mission. And so I'm sure when the general community sees, whether it's an overview in June or whether it's when you have a draft ordinance, we'll have to see. You'll probably get concerns about, well, you want to have bees in every zoning district and fur animals in every zoning district. And, they'll say, these are the dimensions you show in the, but that's the process. That's the way it goes. It's your job to put forth what you think makes the most sense, what you want to advocate for.
Right.
And then you will get responses, and the planning board and the town council will figure it all out, make adjustments, and then hopefully we'll adopt an ordinance ultimately.
I'm sorry, Jim, go ahead.
So, I was looking through the table of uses, Mike, and kind of thinking back to the planning board experiences. And, I had one question for you in terms of an opinion, and then another question more for the Ag Commission, thinking about going to the planning board. And the first thing is in the table of uses, this is the first time a use has been introduced related to transportation, which is the use of public roads.
Right.
And that's really unusual for zoning and our zoning. And I can't think of why transportation would be restricted in the town other than weight limits for, certain times of the year.
I
So,
think agriculture is exempt from all weight limits as it is
Yeah,
to
it
this
is.
date,
so,
even with the old ordinances.
On any road.
so with ag plates,
Excuse me,
No,
doesn't agriculture though include lumbering?
Yes, it
Logging?
does, yeah.
There's no
So-
weight limits on lug trucks?
Well, they can use certain roads even if,
Yeah, logging doesn't fall under the agricultural rules in Durham especially. Farming falls under, agricultural rules as far as road transport.
so with ag and farm plates,
Yes.
okay. So, but
Well,
this,
it goes over and above that. You get into feed haulers and whatnot,
milk, dairy trucks.
dairy
those-
trucks, whatever. The town cannot
So,
penalize them for
so
going
that,
over the weight
I
limits.
think that really then is the heart of my question
Yeah.
is zoning doesn't deal with transportation and the uses of public roads. So I would expect that the planning board would really get distracted and scratch their heads around something like that versus, you know, the more meaty things. And the other comment I have, and it's because I just couldn't figure out the history, but we have a thing called compost production and storage. And I think the first thing that the planning board is going to ask, which we're not clarifying yet, is that composting, production and storage just what's created on site? Or could somebody in a residential B lot with an acre of land start bringing in biomass and composting as a business? And I think if it's a piece of land where somebody's doing something with their land and composting, whether it stays there or is sold is fine, but, or I think would be received well, but I think without clarity and the possibility that you could have commercial enterprises bringing in something, I think will, you know, kind of be a,
Yep. So we can, by zone, by district, we could put an asterisk on those. So it could be in certain zones, no,
it's not an asterisk, it's,
Or,
you know,
but
it's no
not
longer a
permitted.
P, it's.
no longer a
not-
P,
Yeah.
right?
Not permitted.
Yeah.
Well,
So I think a lot of what the planning board is gonna look at is the definitions, and then sort of what are the ways that it can be applied that are not what we intend. And, but yet, there's just, it hasn't been flushed out enough, for me to kind of go through all of it. So, I just wanted to make those two comments with.
Jim?
Right, and in terms of the, yeah, I mean, as you say, the bottom half of the table, probably most of those, if not nearly all of them, would probably not be in a table of uses, they're accessory, so you wouldn't need to. But there would be, I imagine, a pretty involved section in Article 20, Standards for Particular Uses, which is going to go on for pages and spell out all the details. It would spell out accessory uses and all the other things. There are some accessory uses in the table of uses, so there may be some farmer's market, farm stand, forestry, you know, that would be in the table, but we'll figure that out as
Yep.
we put it together.
but would we be striking the two transportation,
That's what I was asking, yeah.
Well,
lines?
My opinion is that when we go through this and kind of get to the point where we want to, I suspect we might look at a few things like that
Yeah.
and strike them out after we've looked at them in more detail.
That's a good observation. John?
When we look at the big picture, I think it's very important that the planning board understand where this is coming from, that it's not simply the idea or the bias or whatever of the Agricultural Commission, but that it reflects the state. It reflects the state definition of agriculture, which has been supported and maintained for God knows how long in terms of years. And it also reflects the as I say, the state definition, but it reflects a number of other things that relate to food, and the fact that RSA 425-2A says that the town should encourage and support, all towns, all cities, should encourage and support agriculture wherever it occurs within their boundaries. So we're functioning as the Agricultural Commission, taking the state definition of agriculture and the statute, the 425-2A, and various other statutes, and attempting to implement them in the town. I think it's important that the planning board understand that, so it's not just, oh, that's the idea of the Agricultural Commission. We're taking a much bigger idea and doing the job of supporting agriculture, but it's not a narrow bias, it's very broad in the state of New Hampshire.
I would never use the word bias. It's not a, what you're presenting is not a bias. It's part of your mission and it's what you're proposing.
Right.
Now, granted,
And our master plan
it has a
vision.
particular perspective, which may be different from other people in town. Just like, as you probably know, the planning board is now reviewing a draft solar ordinance that was endorsed by the Energy Committee. And, you know, we've gotten, the planning board held a public hearing, and there were a number of comments that were a sense that it wasn't quite strong enough, that there needed to be more protections of buffers. So the planning board is now wrestling with this issue. A lot of people want to see more buffers, but a lot of people who are pro-solar, I mean, everyone's in Durham is pro-solar, which is a good thing, but
Pro-chicken
but people on the Energy Committee are concerned if we have too strong buffers and you've got to spend a lot of money on landscaping, it will not be affordable. So the planning board has to find that wise middle ground. And I think we're going to see a similar discussion here.
I just want to say that the types of things that I'm just, kind of bringing out, John, are not trying to inhibit agriculture and even inhibit what the state definition is. It's just trying to make it appropriate for what goes into zoning.
Right.
And then it's, just philosophic, trying to, there'll be different opinions, but what things might not end up promoting agriculture, but causing angst in the community. I don't see many, but, so.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things that I think the state law is pretty absolute about. We could not prohibit, growing crops, probably anywhere. I think that looks pretty straightforward. But my understanding is that the town in most areas may have reasonable regulations for these uses.
Absolutely. But the thing to remember is that if it's not explicitly addressed in the zoning ordinance, then it's allowed. That's where the state enabling legislation for agriculture is different from many other things. It's kind of like the ADU ordinance, the accessory dwelling unit thing, where if you don't specifically call that out, then it's implied that that use is allowed. And I think that's where our existing definitions of agriculture and our existing table of uses, and Audrey has said this too, leave big gaps for you as town people trying to interpret what's allowed, how much say the town has, and where it can happen, and how it can happen, because you're open now to a lot of interpretation. So I'm hoping that by taking the state definition of each of these activities, and we can, as we said, put them in the zones, then it makes it a lot easier for Audrey to do her job. Now we've addressed agriculture and its uses and where it can be, because right now, if you don't, it's allowed. James?
There is nothing in your coming proposal that would conflict with the shoreline protection overlay or the wetland overlay?
No, because we really can't. Those zoning,
Already established.
right, are
And
established.
the town buffers that exist are, well,
Yeah,
so you don't have those types of conflicts that people need to look for.
that particular, this thing always. Move your microphone a little closer,
Or my
James.
mouth a little, yeah, yeah, okay.
Okay. Nope.
I have a philosophical question. This table, this matrix, uses a lot of Ps, which sound like, to me, permitted, which,
This is just the man to take it up.
right. So it would seem, to follow up what John Carroll mentioned, that we're encouraging appropriate best management agricultural practices, not looking for ways to prohibit. So the P is
Permit.
permit, not prohibit. Do I have this right?
Oh, P is not prohibited, it's permitted.
No, but I mean, the intent of this table is to encourage rather than to prohibit.
Correct. So the X is
Right.
no, the P is yes.
So again, to follow up what John said, our mission, our mandate is to take the state definition and try to codify it such that the end result is that Durham has an enlightened approach to agricultural practices within all of our zones that are listed here. I think that's the intent of this table.
Yes. This is the very simplistic view of that intent, right?
Yeah.
So what do we do next with this table? Because it sounds like you're leaving this as it is? You're not saying?
Well,
there's-
my role is to help you
Right.
develop a good ordinance.
Okay,
So, I mean, I can, just in general, as I said, I think you'll get pushback on a number of these things, particularly with livestock and, mammals, in most zones, certainly in residential zones. And it depends on what other kind of standards we might put in about dimensional things and numbers and, we'll have to distill some things from the best management practices. But you are putting through an assertive ordinance to promote agriculture. And you'll see what kind of response there is in the community. And I don't want to, beat this too much, but I think it is analogous to the solar energy ordinance.
so what will you do next with this? Or
Well,
how
so-
can we help you
Yeah,
prepare
so
that
I
draft?
think the next step is, think of it as, well, you've done the first thing. You've done some of the heavy lifting here, this is what you suggest going where. And the final product is going to be a full draft ordinance. And we're not ready for that, because as we've said, with the planning board chair, asked that you discuss this with the planning board before doing that, and that's a wise thing to do. You don't want to spend many, many hours refining an ordinance, finishing an ordinance, and then bringing it to the planning board, and the planning board has tons of concerns. So I think if I can take this, and for your next meeting on June 11th, I can sort of take this half the way to an ordinance, incorporate it, into ordinance form, have a lot of the draft language. I'll have a lot of blanks and holding, we need definitions for these things and, just a holding thing. And,
And I can start typing that narrative, that one-page kind of how we got to the next page, which is what you're gonna help us do.
yeah, so it'll be a rough document, but it'll move toward an ordinance, and then you can look at it on June 11th and make whatever changes you want. And then, I think if we could present that to the planning board on June 27th, you'll get feedback from them, and then finish the draft ordinance.
Okay.
Although the zoning generally doesn't include a narrative, just.
Well, I was just gonna, no, I know, not in the zoning, but just to accompanying in the planning board packet was what I'm thinking, and so just to have a little background of how the Agricultural Commission developed the proposal they'll be seeing that night, unless you feel that's not necessary.
No, I think two things are necessary to be successful. First is before I had a chance to join you all, and I just listened to things, I thought you were taking the New Hampshire definition and just dropping it on Durham, okay, across the board. And so I became involved with you, and my feedback recently to the town council has been that you're using that as a framework, but applying it based on what you know about Durham. We're not gonna have horses in, residential A, And I kind of sensed a real sense of relief. And so what I recommend with the planning board is we spend a little time putting together a presentation, with a couple slides, a couple, town, zoning graphs or whatever, just showing that there's thought in taking the state definition and applying it in a thoughtful way to Durham. And don't rely on the people there 100% to kind of like figure it all out just because, they get a table of uses.
Right.
And so the one thing I can offer is to like try and do the draft of that, so you can look at it and see if it would be helpful.
That would be helpful.
And then,
Thank you.
to the extent that Michael can put up with me, if there's any assistance that he
Okay.
needs, because we've worked on a number of zoning
I
things.
think one of the things we have to do for the zoning is we have to incorporate the space and housing guide with it, and it has to follow everything that's permitted, because it makes it more understandable. If you compare the two, because a lot of the permitted areas that we have permitted, if you don't have the acreage or the square footage, you wouldn't be permitted anyways, if you went by the definition of agriculture.
Right.
And that's something that would go into that Article 20, the
Yeah.
performance standards, right?
Yeah, but how do we do, I mean, for example, the best management practice, now, you wrote the 2 ordinances for poultry and goats a few years ago, which I think are great. They seem to be working very well. But there is language in there about best management practices, but I suspect it hasn't really been an issue. Because I think there, the BMPs are kind of secondary. I think it would be difficult to rely on BMPs as the main thing. I think if citizens, for example, say, gee, I'm concerned about, you want to have my next door neighbor can have a cow on a half an acre in the, residence,
But the concern
C
goes
zoning.
away if
That's
you
what
go
he's
with the
saying.
space and housing guides.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if we adopt that portion of it,
Or,
issue goes
or
away
embedded
because
into
nobody
how,
has enough
Or,
acreage for
I
it.
mean, we probably would have to, and I can work on this, for the next meeting, I've come up with some suggestions, and you can look at it. This says, I can look at this table of the space and housing guidelines and try to take some hard numbers from there and just put it into the ordinance and based on this and, go from there. Because you wouldn't be able to say, must follow BMPs for housing, because it's not precise. It's, a horse is 1 to 2 acres.
Right. and so I think we're saying you need to have 3. Right? Is that what we said for livestock allowed on lots of over 3 acres? Was what we
Yeah,
felt
so, I
comfortable
mean,
with last meeting.
I'll take,
Well, you can break that down even more, because you have to go from miniature horses to.
Right.
A workhorse. I mean,
Right, very big difference.
there's
yeah.
such a big difference from one size to the other that, the
Yeah.
1
So
acre
what we
to
said,
3
for
acres
example,
could
right,
be-
the residential A and B and C, we said the only livestock allowed are dwarf goats, sheep, because we were thinking they're about the same size as smaller goats, rabbits, chickens, turkeys. So those are the only livestock allowed in residence A, B, and C, was under our proposal. And even then, they only would be allowed on lots that meet those guidelines set by Cooperative Extension for housing.
well, but we'll have to extrapolate from that table.
Yes, no, I
hard
understand, I agree,
numbers to
yeah, the
put in.
number.
Yeah.
But just so you know, we're not saying cows could be in those zones. You used cow as a reference.
Oh, okay.
We didn't think
Just
that was a
wouldn't
good
even-
idea. So we said no beef and dairy cattle, no steer, no oxen, no horses, no mules, no full-size goats. We didn't put emus in there, but they are in the state definition, right? We felt. So I think we were using, following on the precedent set by the goat and the chicken ordinance with regards to what would be an accessible.
So I'm assuming that
Size.
we don't want to, that you don't want to have a separate section for each kind of animal that we did for poultry and goats.
Well, when we first met with you, remember Renee and I, and we thought, you thought that was overkill.
Well, it probably would be. It'd be a lot of work.
Well-
It would be more precise, but.
Absolutely. We're not ruling it out. I think we're willing to go with how we can be the most successful with what we envision. And we are,
Can we do it as a
this is
table?
not a fast-track thing necessarily.
Yeah.
And if that makes it more successful for residents who want to conduct this type of land use, because Audrey and the town has the information they need to make it be successful, then
It might be, I mean, it probably would be a good approach to,
Let's
and
add
maybe it wouldn't be
emus
that
and have
much
an emu
work,
ordinance.
because we could just adapt the poultry for each one, but we have a separate section in Article 20 on equines, aquaculture, bees, fur animals, and a couple of others.
Yep,
And maybe it's not that hard just to adapt the existing ones.
okay. Yeah. Or we just take those and amend them and add the other things.
Yeah.
The goats ordinance we take and amend and say sheep, rabbits, chickens, turkeys, or something like that,
Yeah.
right?
I think that would actually be a better
Yeah.
approach. It'd be very, could
We'd just be
very
amending an
precise.
existing one,
Yeah, to some extent.
yeah. John?
For background, I think it would be a good idea for each member of the planning board to have a copy of the RSA, which is the state definition of agriculture, and also the RSA, which is the Granite State Farm to Plate, 425:2-A. Those two at least, with no commentary, just, and they're readable, they're quite readable, standalone.
Yeah, definitely.
I have those electronically, so you can
We
distribute
could
them.
put them in the PowerPoint.
Or post them.
I think that people will get concerned over odor, noise, property damage, and environmental issues. You know, if compost is not properly maintained, et cetera. And I think as you look at the ordinances, you ought to be looking for those 4 issues.
And really, that's what
You know,
the,
property damage can come from the goats if they get into somebody's rose garden,
right,
because they do like to eat.
yeah. And we would be referencing those manual, the BMPs, which are, best management practices for handling of compost, fertilizer, and manure.
Right.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
those, we would be referencing
But I
that.
think that's why I don't know that planting crops is an issue at all, but keeping a horse may not be bad. Keeping 300 horses might be challenging.
Yes, and. it
And I
wouldn't
realize you're
be
gonna
allowed-
address some of that with the lot size, and I'm assuming that comes along with animal counts, like it was with the chickens,
Yep,
so. But that's where I think
you're right,
people who aren't
the
as in
nuisance
touch
factor.
would be upset with
Yep. We
their
agree.
noise.
And I'm assuming that in the table here, the intent of that is both accessory uses and principal commercial uses. So if someone wants to have a mule in a zone where it's allowed, the same standards would apply to a single family with 1 or 2 mules as to a commercial farm operation.
Yeah, we didn't really break that down, I think because that definition of commercial agriculture that exists in our ordinance now, we don't know, that's not part of the state definition. We've had that conversation, I think all of us together many times, which is, if you have chickens on Madbury Road and you're selling your eggs once a week, are you commercial? Yeah, you're selling your eggs. So when you guys correct me if I'm wrong, when we were teasing each of these uses out, we were looking at it from a commercial as well as a hobby background. So for example, the aquaculture. One of the reasons we have P going across the O or the Moodor and Orley is that if someone came in and wanted to propose to be growing salmon in a warehouse or a barn commercially, yeah, right, why wouldn't it be allowed? That kind of thing, which is, that type of use is popping up a lot in northern New England, big ones. So, we weren't differentiating between the two. We were looking at the zone and the size of the parcel as being the limiting,
It doesn't matter to the neighbor,
right?
whether you're commercial or you're residential, if you're doing something that's annoying them by noise or damage or things. So, I mean, it really, to me, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, dueling roosters will bother anybody.
That's right.
Yeah.
So,
The state enabling legislation for agriculture treats, kind of has those 2 tracks. So if it's livestock is a separate track in terms of the town's authority, but if it's agritourism or retail, it's a much lighter tread the town can take, if that makes sense. So where I think the language is, site plan review can certainly be requested, but the state legislation under whatever that is, 624, says the town shall hold a public hearing, shall hold a public hearing and must grant a waiver, subject to certain things. So it's very different. The animal husbandry component versus the retail commercial side is treated very differently. And I have all those things, but anyway.
Yeah,
It's a
and then
different
you
track.
didn't mention agritourism, because that's that's considered a standard accessory use.
Right, and that bill will
Farm
change now, it's now changed with the legislation that just passed. What-
Oh, that new legislation was passed about that?
Yeah.
Oh, and
So now the
what-
Commissioner of Agriculture has the final say over whether it's an agritourism activity or not. But we didn't put it in here yet.
Oh,
So agritourism, as you know, is part of the state definition of agriculture. It's considered agriculture. It's permitted as on any property, anywhere, where the primary use of the property is agriculture. And this is an accessory use. So it's one of those things where it would almost be a P, because, I don't know, but let's say in every zone we had in town, there's already some kind of agricultural use happening in that zone, whether it's been there forever before it was created as Orly or whatever, then agritourism would be a P. Doesn't mean it's not subject to site plan review and other
Right.
things either, but it's just the way the state definition is now, is that if the primary use of the land is agriculture, then agritourism is allowed.
right.
So that's sleigh rides and all that.
Yeah,
kind of-
and you can, the town can choose to define agritourism, what you would, I mean, we have that control too. But if the primary use of the parcel is agriculture,
And agritourism is.
agritourism is allowed, right? Because it's part of the state, that was the change 2 years ago.
Agritourism would be like what Emery Farm does with the Halloween rides,
Yep.
hay rides and
Yep, corn
cornfield.
mazes, any
Yeah.
type of thing where, I think that, attracts people to the farm to enjoy the farm environment.
Sugaring operation.
I mean, Farm Day is one big agritourism, right? We're inviting people to the farm to enjoy the farm, and we have a townwide agritourism event with that.
In going through the table, I have a question about one of these boxes. Under Moodor, we have a P*4, which says not allowed beef, dairy, cattle, steer, oxen, horses.
Ooh, but you got the horses.
Moodor includes the equine
Oh, and
facility
you.
for the university,
Yeah, yeah,
so.
yeah. So wait, no, we said equines were allowed above in Moodor, P.
That's P.
So go to equine,
Yeah,
go across,
right, yeah.
Moodor, P.
But then under, it comes down under poultry
Oh,
where it goes
poultry, right.
P4.
Yeah, yeah.
But P4 says not allowed.
Oh, yeah, sorry, you're right.
So that just seems odd.
That is right, you're right. So what do? We take we just turn that into a P?
Well, I think I know what you mean, so I
Thanks,
can
David. You're right, that's
clarify
fine.
that in the draft.
In the draft, yeah. I
I'm
think
assuming you
that
mean.
wasn't our intent, that was my mistake when I typed it up.
Right, I'm assuming there you mean if you're saying livestock is P, but then under poultry you have P4, which means beef and dairy cattle not allowed, I assume you mean that some
That was for those
livestock's
other
not
zones.
allowed in Moodor.
Right.
Right?
That was that P*4 was designed for the other zones,
Okay.
more the Moodor, that was my error.
So, and obviously, a lot of things still would require site plan review. A big difference with site review is that if it's an accessory use to a single family, there's no site review. If you're adding a shed or, but if it's commercial, then any structure is going to have site review.
Right.
And kind of, I think that's after we get this done, that's our next project, which is modified site plan review for agriculture. Just saying, just giving you a heads up.
Something to look for, pre-used of coming attraction.
That's part of my world domination plan, that's my next thing, yeah.
It's kind of interesting that since the state of New Hampshire is not neutral on these questions, it's got a bias, it's a good word, it's got a bias in favor of agriculture, which is very, very long-standing in the state. That would encourage anyone who wants to come into the town who is prohibited from doing various things to maybe lean towards going into court on that, charging perhaps that the town is not complicit with what the state expects or wants or whatever. And then it would have to be worked out legally if that were to happen. But the state is clearly biased in favor. That state definition
Yep.
is very, very clear. That's back to the 19th century, but and reiterated in many other forms. So it's kind of interesting, because I could just picture someone coming in, being told by the town, you can't do this, that, or something else, and then they say, well, this is an agricultural operation. If you're an agricultural operation, you're different from a lot of other activities. This battle is going on now in Lee with the gardens there and so forth. And the question is that an agricultural operation? Maybe, maybe not. It's not real clear. But if you're talking about a clear agricultural operation, the state comes down on the side of favoring. So it's something to think about.
As James taught us, if you eat, you're in.
Yeah.
Does
And
anyone?
I'm assuming that, obviously, you don't want to, there's another letter you could put in there. I'm assuming you don't want anything by special exception.
Well, I don't know. I think we're starting off here with what we thought was the clearest way to convey our intent or our wish, and we'll go from there
Yeah.
with the narrative and the meeting with the planning board. I don't think we don't know yet.
And there's
Yeah.
some animal we haven't thought of, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, a really ugly
Part
animal,
of the
you
problem.
might make
Right.
special exception.
Right. So, I think we just felt that this conveyed, I realize there's background information and other information that's needed, but it was a good rubric for what we felt
Comfortable.
would be.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, this is great that you did this, because this way, as Jim said, if the planning board or the community did have objections, this way they can pinpoint them, and you can talk about those specifically. It's not just a blanket
Right,
presentation.
right.
Well, I will have something for you for June 11th, and if
And
I have
We're
questions.
happy to help. I mean, there's enough,
Yeah,
wanna
how about if
pull
I'll
people
just
in.
contact
Yeah,
you?
contact me and say-
I mean, I'm just gonna do my best to interpret what you've done in the most kind of simplest way. And when I come sure on June 11th, you'll say, oh, no, that's not what we wanted, and you make the
Okay.
adjustments then. But I'll work on that, and then if I have any questions of what was intended, or how do we deal with this, I'll just send you a note.
Okay, great.
Do that.
Thank you, Michael. So you'll be back with us June 11th then?
Yeah, so
Okay,
does that
perfect.
sound good?
We're very appreciative. Thank
All
you.
right, great.
One other comment is, so this is more of a Herculean effort, I think, than the zoning rewrite that was recently done. And I don't know if you've ever talked about time frames for expectations, but it will likely push out to the very end of the year or early next year before this work gets approved, just so people have a realistic, expectation of time frame with public hearings, planning board, town council, and so.
Thank you. Yep. And I think that's kind of how goats and chickens went
was gonna say,
too, after the master plan, yeah. There was a learning curve on everybody's part, but, yep.
Would
No,
you
I
be
don't think-
planning on holding a public hearing?
We could certainly hold one as an informational one, but
I wasn't suggesting that, I was asking.
no. I think we're open to,
You could certainly do that.
or an
Something
informational
you
session.
might think about, just to see if there's a general public sentiment out there in any ways.
Yep, we could.
By the end of the process, we'll be public hearing to death, there's.
Right, right. Well, we certainly, this has been on our to-do list for a long time, and we don't mean to cut to the chase by any means, because we want to get it right, and we want it to be successful, and I think it's going to be a model for lots of other towns, just like our master plan chapter was, so I think it's good things take time,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Great,
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, so
Very
I'll-
much.
my pleasure. So I'll see you on June 11th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I had a quick question about the space and housing guidelines.
Yep, did you want Michael to stay for that?
No,
Okay.
no, I just need to. It comes down under
Good night.
the last item, family needs, where it says, family needs 6 hens, but it needs 12 turkeys. Why is, what's the thought there?
12 months of the year.
Meat.
Yes, layers, so maybe it should say layers or something, yeah. Because there's 24 broilers next
That
to
makes,
it. Yeah,
that makes,
layers.
imply that those are,
Yeah,
okay.
good question. Alrighty, next on the agenda is the minutes of the April meeting, which Suzanne was kind enough to take for us, but she has some questions for me, just to make sure what she captured was accurate. So she
I have them here, but
has them here.
she's gonna send me the rewrites, so we're gonna vote on them next month.
We'll have them on our agenda for June,
Okay.
but I thank her for taking them. Really, Lee, it comes down to that you're not allowed to miss a meeting. That's really what this is about. I'm sorry to tell you that. Okay, correspondence. Before some of you guys got here, I started passing around the Eversource route map, which is in front of Jim, and what I told everybody else is Bob Varney, who's an engineer or a planner, I guess, for Normando, contacted me, I guess it was about a week and a half ago, and I've known Bob for a really long time in all his manifestations as the regional planning director, director of Office of State Planning, all the way through. He was EPA regional administrator. And he asked for the Ag Commission's review of the route map for the Seacoast Reliability Project because they're interested in hearing from us of whether there's some impacts to agriculture. And so I asked him to send the route map, and he did. It was kind of the generic Google Earth version, and then I asked him to send us one that had the roads and the parcel lines on it so that we could be more constructive in our review and response to him. And he asked me to not forward it to you. So I've had it, but he didn't want me to electronically ship it out there. It's not for public consumption, which is why we have it here tonight. So what we need to do tonight is look at that map and see if the route poses any threat or impact to agriculture.
There's one agricultural property it crosses. I don't know what the person's name is on Durham Point Road.
Okay. And then I will get back to him. So which one's that?
That's Stonewall Farm,
Right at the
Stone
sharp
House.
corner as you
Yeah,
go by
yeah.
Colony Cove. I can't think of it.
Stonewall, Stonehouse, something
Step
like
sheep,
that.
Right on Colin?
just past Colony Cove. Step sheep on that corner.
Okay. Can you find it, Jim, on there?
No, but
Okay.
I have a question that, so,
Other
see
than
the
that,
route, what is it that is gonna be, is gonna be bigger power lines through
Yeah.
there?
Yeah.
Bigger
Really tall
poles?
ones.
Those,
Tall
and
towers.
Taller,
towers.
probably a little
Towers,
bit
yeah.
wider
But there will
right
also
away.
be,
If you're coming from Dover, the new power lines are running across now. They've got the double poles. I don't know if you've looked out over there. The big cast iron poles.
In Madbury?
Madbury Road, they're doing the same thing.
this is that part of that.
That's what they want to
Yeah,
run
on
up through
on
there.
108, just before you get to Hannaford's, if
Yeah.
it crosses the road there, it'll look kind of like that.
And the question Bob posed to us is not also, when they're up, but as they're putting them up, would there be impacts to agriculture? So one of, as the project is being constructed. And so he knew about Farm Day, and the date of that, that kind of stuff. And he asked about UNH, would there be events at the university that might be impacted by route construction? And so as I said, I told him to call Anita Klein, or just because she would have a better idea about when things were happening on properties, so, yeah, Jim.
So, I would be very cautious, in how to respond to this. First of all, it is something that in our community has caused a great deal of angst.
Yes.
The second thing is we are not given enough information to make any assessment on agriculture. For example, Eversource has a right-of-way which is larger than what you see today for the smaller power lines, okay? We have no maps in terms of where they plan to clear, into what property they're gonna clear. Could there be some agriculture there? To answer that question, you'd have to do, a quick inventory of the research on, EMF field impact on agriculture. So I really, I think in other areas we've been through this where we're asked to give something, some group in the town, concurrence, is it okay? And we have at times, and we found that we really didn't have enough information to make an assessment. And I would just be very leery about the Ag Commission putting any stamp on this.
Right,
this-
and I talked with Todd about that specifically, because I'm aware of the angst, and also Bob's method of conveying his request was very disconcerting to me, actually. And so
I think.
I said, what I asked, I called Todd after he got back from vacation and said, okay, here's the request. Do you want the council to reply to it? You know, should this be something the Ag Commission just replies on its own? I didn't feel comfortable that we could be, you know, on a town letterhead as a town-appointed commission responding to Eversource without it going through the council or whatever. And Todd's response to me, at least at that point, was, no, I think it could come from the Ag Commission. The council wouldn't need to vet it before it goes. But I understand what you're saying too, is
Then
that,
we're in danger of, for instance, we say that, well, it has impact on one farm.
right,
But then, in the next month, we find out there are 30 landowners who have concern about some aspect of agriculture, which could be even, you know, maple sugar farming, you know, for a few families, you know, that we didn't even consider. And,
yeah.
you know, I would suggest letting it even go out there for, you know, a couple of weeks in the Friday updates, you know, in terms of, you know, if you feel that the impact of SRP, you know, could impact anything related to agriculture, you know, please contact us or somebody. I think that's the least you would want to do.
Okay.
And also demand or expect, you know, information in terms of right-of-ways, clearing, you know, some technical information on voltages, you know, what the line heights are. I mean, it really takes some due diligence.
Part of the problem is that until I saw this, I wasn't able to find anything except for this broad,
Right, that's what he
you know,
gave me at
Google
first.
Earth picture of, that says, yeah, the power line's coming through here. Well, that doesn't get, the citizens of Durham don't have any better information than I do about
And
that.
You can go,
they won't, he didn't want that,
you
right,
can
it
go
was
to
very interesting.
the SEC website, and there's lots of documentation there. But let me tell you that, you know, I have a good laptop like you do, and it, you know, it's more than my laptop can handle in terms of the document
Documents, yeah.
sizes, and so,
So, Jim, what would you suggest? I mean, I love the Friday update. I can put something out there.
my suggestion I would throw out is that, you know, at this point, we're in no position to make an assessment. However, we're going out to the community to ask for input on it, and for us to make any assessment, we would need more information,
Yep,
including
on the right-of-way, the clearing, the
right-of-way
voltage. Okay.
clearing,
Mm-hmm.
use of herbicides, you know,
Truck access.
truck access.
And let us not forget, oyster production is agricultural activity, Great Bay.
Right,
And I don't know that there's been any settlement about how to deal
No.
with Great Bay.
No,
on this
no, there's
question.
not. I mean, that's
That was the
where-
fascinating conversation with him. It was a done deal.
That's where it sort of has gotten held up in the SEC.
Right.
And standpoint is what is the impact of Oyster Bay, I mean, on Great Bay and the oysters and,
So if I draft tomorrow an email reply to Bob, would you read it first?
I'd be happy to.
Thank
And I might also solicit Todd's.
Yes, okay, I'll send it to both of you and
Yeah.
Todd, okay. I'll capture what we've just said,
Did
but,
you say they have not disclosed the voltage that's
No,
gonna be on
no,
the
they
line?
have. I just,
How much is it?
I think it's 230 kV. I did some EMF studies on it a year ago, but I don't remember. But that information is available.
I'll capture in that request, I mean, when I contact Bob and say that, you know, we don't have adequate information about right-of-ways and clearing and voltages, but I'll capture that idea of the impact of EM, as you
I
mentioned.
mean, I live beside a
on-
250,000 volt line.
Okay.
And, you know, cordless phones were interesting things to look at, but they were useless. Various remote control devices had challenges, so there was other issues for the neighbors, but I had just heard more generic comments from some of the farmers in Indiana that you could just see the stunted corn crops under the power
Under
lines,
the power lines, okay.
and that the cows tended to avoid going under the power lines.
How will you inform the public as to where it is, if this map is sort of an underground
Yeah, that's a
item?
good question, but maybe that's a question I toss back to him.
Todd has some maps that he's included in the Friday updates. And then all the landowners
I've been
that,
informed.
with right-of-ways and abutting have been informed,
Okay.
so
So they're already on top of that,
There's a-
knowing that they're there.
pretty knowledgeable community.
So am I misread, it looked to me like it went straight down Madbury Road, is that,
No.
am I misreading that?
No, it
Goes
goes,
out
it
by the
goes
field
down
house, goes
along,
out by the field house, right?
yeah, it goes down along the railroad tracks. It starts in Madbury,
Okay.
goes along the railroad tracks, goes underground by the field house and football stadium, then comes back out, and then goes down for a while, and then it makes a kind of a sharp left.
It goes
and-
along the railway track
Okay.
Yeah.
to my house, and then it bangs to Packers Falls substation on Bennett Road, right by the railroad bridge on Bennett Road, between me and Ray.
Yeah.
And then it goes east
I
above
don't-
ground, very high, across 108 into the
Right at Long Marsh.
Sunnyside
before
Long
Long
Marsh
Marsh.
down there.
You can see the existing lines in there, they're very low voltage, but, you know, you can see when they cross,
The biggest impact is the Sunnyside Development, Sandy Brook, that whole
Mm.
corridor right
Yeah.
there. That's the biggest impact right there.
well, and then a Durham Point Road.
Yeah,
and
Durham Point, yeah,
folks-
down through
folks
that.
there. So,
But wasn't this already taken and through executive council and, or what, at the state level, and it was, they said no, and now they've gone back? Is that a
No,
different?
you're thinking of
Northern
the
Pass?
Northern
Northern
Connect
Pass.
Pass.
Yeah, no, that was
And,
denied by the
so
city.
So it's different.
This
So
is in
completely
the
different. Okay.
SEC
I got
process
those two
now.
completely flipped in my head. Okay.
Well, Jim, thank you for your help with that. I'll type something up. The next on correspondence was Ellen's, your May 3rd email about solar panels and pollinators?
Right. Yeah, I just sent that out because I thought it was interesting. I know there was a lot of discussion about, you know, how they were unsightly, and there was some concern about, you know, people putting these panels, and then it would be sort of an eyesore, but then I saw this article and I thought, well, you know, maybe there's a mitigating factor,
Right.
plant gardens around them or something.
If for those,
Um,
I shared it with, I think, because I did send it to James, because some people weren't. So if people hadn't had a chance to look at that link,
Yeah.
what was it saying?
It was saying that you could in fact plant around those panels, you could in fact have, animals grazing around them,
Mhm.
and without it being a problem. And so, you know, I just thought that was something that people could think about, because I know they're sort of presented as just kind of landing, like, you know, in this place, this feeling that they have to be like completely, you know, isolated so that they can get the sun, but apparently they, you know, it's possible to have other things
Going on
around them.
around them and underneath them.
Yeah,
Yep.
so.
Okay. Is that something we should be mentioning with the planning board's solar ordinance
Well, I thought
work?
it might be something that we might want, I just found that one article, and so I sent it because I thought, you know, it was pertinent, but it might be something to, when we get to that point, we might wanna actually do a little more research and see. if,
Okay.
You know, see if it holds, or if there's other information. It just might make the whole thing a little more palatable for people.
Okay.
It did tweak my interest because, you know, I think with, you know, property owners, you know, in Durham, there's a good opportunity just to educate and people respond to it, but I was thinking about large solar arrays, that I think there's a predisposition to using herbicides around them.
You're talking about
And-
the movable ones.
Pardon?
You're
Or
talking
just
about the
those
movable, the array,
real
No,
large
well, I'm just
arrays.
talking about the solar,
panels on,
In general.
like this,
not the ones that.
Like what the town did.
yeah, like the,
Okay.
but
So
it could be much
arrays,
smaller than that, but I think sometimes when companies maintain those, there's a predisposition for using herbicides, because it's less expensive than.
You don't have to take care of stuff underneath.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so my thought was, is in thinking about this, maybe at some point it could be part of the site plan regulations for, you know, larger arrays that require a site plan where, you know, to do things that don't require herbicides. But,
I noticed in coming by Couple Farm the other day when it was 78 or 80 degrees almost, it was a hot day we had last week, all the sheep on
Are
his
underneath
farm
them.
were underneath.
For
those-
shade, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
And I thought, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, they also concentrate the rainwater in narrow troughs,
Right.
basically, in front of them,
Exactly.
so
That's a great.
that's where you're
voice.
getting this,
Good grass.
yeah, tremendous growth.
so maybe they should all come with sheep.
Yeah.
Or goats or something.
That too is part of my world domination.
There's a family in Kensington that has goats with a solar array. Goats no good.
No,
They
because,
nibble on the wires.
right,
Oh,
yeah.
see,
We go-
sheep again
the
are
sheep-
proving.
The sheep are, yeah.
And the dwarf breeds of beef cattle, the smaller,
Mm-hmm.
smaller breeds would be very appropriate for that as well.
Never seen the dwarf breeds.
Maybe we bring a dwarfed beef cattle to the planning board presentation, so they can get a sense of scale.
Does anyone have a dwarf?
I could get one. The last correspondence was the New Hampshire Food Alliance webinar that we were invited to participate in, and John has very graciously, we'll do that next Tuesday?
Yes,
Yes.
and John Porter of the Bosquen Agricultural Commission will be on board as well, the two of
And
us.
you guys have met John when they came, well, many of you who were on the Ag Commission when they joined us a couple years ago here. So that's great, and it's a webinar the Food Alliance is doing on the role of agricultural commissions
right.
and things that we've done. So John, has asked me to send Jennifer Wilhelm some photos,
Yeah.
because it's a webinar, so as people are participating online, she has just images on screen that people can look at. So I sent a bunch from the Memorial Day Parade and from Farm Day and our Farm Day poster, and I also took some screenshots of the master plan or chapter, just so you know.
Great.
That'll be popping up there. And, so people can get a sense of some of the things that we've done. We could put that table of uses up there. Ooh.
I hope the paper mache bee is well represented.
It is, it's in there a couple of times, as well as Ray's float and, the Bee City USA sign. So,
Yeah.
those will all be there. Was there any under new business before we go to old business?
actually, just real quickly, we talked about sludge last time.
Oh, yeah, you were our sludge researcher.
Well, actually, no, a tidbit of information I found, which is really interesting, and it speaks well of Durham, is so the wastewater treatment plant, you know, the end of the process is pressed sludge, and all of that sludge is taken by Resource Management from Holderness, and it's used in a composting and land applications for them, and I looked at their website, and it ultimately is used for fertilizer and providing nitrogen, a lot of other things, but it just seems incredibly better than the application of commercial fertilizers. And Mike Lynch said that the sludge from Durham is viewed as some of the best in the state.
Oh, yeah, of course he, there's another gateway sign right there, along with Tree City USA.
Yeah, but
Gold Star Sludge.
How much,
the reason I found it interesting is that it's a much better use than trucking it and burying it
Burying
someplace.
it, right.
Yeah.
But it is agriculture that creates the opportunity
Right.
for a more sustainable.
Good
was there a
connection.
discussion on how much pharmaceuticals was included in the sludge?
I know one time I had a briefing about it, and it does get tested for chemicals. I don't know if it's what chemicals. There's heavy metals, but then there's some other ones. but the reason Durham's is kind of like grade A is it has such a low chemical content, which allows it to be used in that manner. Some towns, they couldn't use it that way, so.
Lots of university students instead of industry, right?
Right. Not a lot of hospital lab work, I guess, going into the system.
I think even though they take it away, we still pay them to
Yeah.
do it, but, so it's not that income generating yet, but,
Do you know what amount they take away per year?
no, but it's an impressive facility and operation, and there's a truck there that's there 24
Yeah, it's
hours a
just
day,
dedicated.
being loaded with sludge and
And
regular-
leaving when it's full?
But we had a town warrant a couple of years ago to put in new sludge presses, and which reduces the weight, makes it more valuable.
Takes the water out.
And the truck's there taking what comes out of the presses, so.
Thank you. Okay, old business. Today, public education outreach, Be Friendly program, and Lee has been very busy since we last saw him.
I wasn't at the last meeting, so if you don't mind, I'm just gonna zip through some of the things that were from our March meeting, but there was gonna be a workshop on pesticides. I don't know if that needs to be updated. There was talk about it, or?
Right, we did talk about having,
Somebody come and talk about it.
right,
Yeah.
I
Nothing's
forget who was
happened.
gonna
Didn't
find.
really
yeah.
happen?
Nope.
Okay, all right. Bookmarks, are they still in the works, or?
Yep, Carol and I've got those. She's not here, but they, next meeting, yep. She
Okay,
was
no,
gonna
I-
run them for me.
Yeah.
Yep.
And adding a honeybee to the Durham AgCom logo.
I have that out on assignment.
I sent to everyone this morning, late this morning, two, I guess you would call them flyers, or I don't know, but they're meant to be encouraging people's view towards pollinators, in particular honeybees, since we're a Bee City USA. One is a contest for the Durham lawn with the most dandelions. I mentioned this at an earlier meeting, so I thought this one pager might be something that could be posted on the Friday update. It would basically just be if a town resident says, yeah, I've got lots of dandelions and I'm proud of it, and here's a photo of them, that we could make an award to the top 3 yards that have the most dandelions. I have enough honey that this can be done. And in reality, I don't expect a whole lot of people to submit, but if there are 5 or 6 that do.
No, that's a good prize.
And each one has lots of dandelions in the yard, I have enough to make more than 3.
So I suppose members of the commission are not allowed.
No, it's all right. The only thing I would say for commission members, you would have to have more dandelions in your yard than I do.
Oh,
Oh,
and it's gotta be dandelions, not violets,
Oh,
not,
well, that's the next one, that's the
That's
next
the
one.
next
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Okay,
But this
okay.
is
this is gonna be
dandelions.
dandelions,
Yeah.
like, that's what we talked
And you'll
about.
see that there's kind of a cartoon there, and I show a picture of a really nice, and then there's a nice photo of a honeybee on dandelions. They really are important. We'll see how people react to this.
Does
Well, I think
Wagon
just the
Hill count?
education about their importance is just as
Wagon
Hill.
important as people
And we can
submitting
make
their photo of their
A little
dandelion.
presentation at the Memorial Day parade if you want to. I mean, I'm
yeah,
up
I
to
think
it.
that would be cool.
So you'll have to tell the speaker, who is, the announcer at the Memorial Day Parade at some point, that
Yeah, exactly, but
gets
but,
announced.
if you would, please take a look at this. If there's anything that needs to be added, changed, modified, let me know. Otherwise, I'll send it to Jenny Berry on Thursday.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you for doing that.
And,
yeah, we need to get it out
yeah,
soon if we're
it's only a
gonna,
couple weeks.
yeah.
But the dandelions will be gone in
We
a couple
could
weeks.
post on the float, maybe, Ray, the winner's name.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
could.
right.
Well, I'm just thinking, I just made a note to myself that I have to update the banners for the float. You have them.
Yeah.
So if you could get them
Maybe
I
the
can get
one
them from
that's
you.
on.
But I just didn't, know there's really, at the Memorial Day Parade, there is an announcer, but it's a kind of a solemn occasion.
And right, I was thinking it doesn't really fit.
So if we had
after I
on the
said that.
float the name of the winner, dandelion, most dandelion contest winner's name, or, something, they'd get credit as we
Yeah, I mean, we
paraded
can
down the
post it
road.
on the Friday update. I mean,
Yeah, that's
I
true.
just thought.
Nope.
I will say, Ray's Fields have lots of dandelions.
So what do you take?
Could be a contender.
Want a picture?
Could be a, was a contender.
But, yeah, if you want to send one in, sure, we're not prejudiced
Are
here.
you actually counting the dandelions in the photo?
No, I mentioned on this, based on a fair, but in parentheses, somewhat subjective site evaluation.
Yeah, method of evaluation.
Squeeze bottle of Lee's Bees Wildflower Honey will be awarded to the top 3 contestants.
Perfect.
Beyond that, it's for fun.
That's fun, and
I know.
it'll be interesting to see who, you
Yeah,
know,
exactly.
how many people participate.
My guess is Todd Selig will pick up on this, but whether or not he has a lawn with a lot of dandelions, I don't know.
Or dandelion costume.
Or
Yeah.
or dandelion.
We could
Yeah.
sneak in and mow his lawn tonight.
But this is, for me, I don't know if the rest, this has not been a great dandelion year.
No, not yet. So cool.
Coming.
Just coming on to this,
I've got-
this
I've
week.
Wagon
I've got
Hill is
quite a few.
loaded
I've
with
got
Yeah.
quite a few in my
Perfect.
yard.
Yeah, well,
So
the
then
other
your
one-
second one.
Yeah, the second one is to coin something I think Teresa came up with, rethink your lawn. Wildflowers are, and I'm trying to be punny, beautiful. This will be kind of an ongoing thing. I included some photographs of early spring wildflowers with dandelions, violets, purple nettle, yellow rocket bluets, and wild strawberry. All of these photos were taken on my lawn, but if people look at a grassy area having wildflowers and don't call them weeds, they really are beneficial. Honeybees, bumblebees, already moths, and a few butterflies are using them. And not everybody needs a chem lawn.
No,
I mean, it's fine if you want to.
that's kind of where we're going with
Yeah,
this.
exactly. But-
Yeah.
So there is, I didn't put a whole lot of thing on here on pesticide use yet. I kept it really simple, just planting and reseeding, mowing, and then beneficial wildflowers. But take a look at it, and if you think there's
Okay.
something that needs to be added, but I'll do this for summer wildflowers, particularly clover, buttercups, daisies,
To
those
put
type
a
of things.
juga, I've got a juga on my lawn.
Yeah.
That's a good one,
And
too.
then, in the fall, particular goldenrod, purple aster.
Asters, yeah.
Are you putting these on our website, at the town website that we
Yeah,
have?
yeah.
Okay, good.
Well, we can ask them to post to it.
That's what I mean,
Yeah.
because
We-
then
we
you
ha-
could see those and they don't have
AgCom
to.
has its own website as well.
Well, it's a link
Or-
on the
a link?
town site, and
Okay.
when Michelle Winsat was on the commission with us, she kind of took on that volunteer role of being the one who had gone to the training to access it, to change it.
But
I
it's
don't
all
know if
different
that's
now.
still,
That's different
I
now.
don't
it's
think,
all
I think it's
different
different now. So I think if we share it with Craig, right? Who-
I'm asking.
Oh, no,
I-
who
I
does the
don't know.
website?
Luke,
Luke. If we share it with Luke, he can post it to the town site for us. I can do that.
Okay,
Once we
yeah.
have the final version.
But get back to me or Teresa with comments by Thursday.
Okay.
And that's. I
That's
think,
great, thank
pretty
you.
much it, yep.
It's perfect timing, too. Farms of Durham videos?
I've talked with David Hills. He's very excited about doing it, and I hadn't been able to get a hold of him, so that was.
An interview?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep, so he and Catherine are interested to be a part of that. And the last person I have to contact is TC again, and then we can get rolling on
Great.
Again, Suzanne, who did you contact?
David Hill at Emery Farm.
Did you
What
say you didn't hear back from them, or you did?
I did, I went and talked to him.
Okay.
When I ran into him, we'd finally caught up with.
So for Jim and maybe James who aren't familiar with this
So
project,
this is an oral history of the 4 biggest farms that remain in Durham, to talk to the people who have been on the farm, or their families have been on the farm before they get switched to, or whatever, in the future,
Mhm.
to someone else. So it was to interview and with Phil
Kincaid.
Kincaid to make a small, short video of each of these farms and their TCs and La Roche and David Hill's Emery Farm, and also Harvey Woodward at Woodward Lumber at the end of town. So those are the 4 that we're working on.
Where's the video going?
It'll be for DCAT.
They're on DCAT,
Okay.
and we have a bunch of them there. They're on
We've already-
YouTube, too.
We've already done a
Those
bunch of,
places.
the community gardens and around town and stuff like that.
Have you already contacted Harvey?
Yes.
Good.
Thank you, Suzanne, for doing that. That's great. Food-friendly yard?
I've been in contact with Josh Meyerowitz, who does a little newsletter for the faculty neighborhood, trying to work out with him to see if he'll send something out to see if people, there might be some people who'd be interested in posting. So I haven't heard back from him about that yet. If that doesn't work out, then I guess I'll just start going door to door. And if anybody knows of anyone, or what we're trying to do is, it's better if we can find 3 or 4 yards that are in close proximity so people can walk from one to the other. So we've had, last year we did Madbury Road, we did several houses on Madbury Road. And so we thought we'd focus on faculty neighborhood because there's a lot going on over there. So I need to get a couple contacts, that's all, so I can go talk to people and see about, maybe setting that up.
And this will be for the walking tour on Farm Day.
Right.
Thank you. The urban farming, I just keep that bullet point there. That was the container garden stuff that we've talked about.
And I wrote to
we need to
him
do
and-
something about that at some
Yeah, I
point.
wrote to him and he never wrote back. That last time, that's what I
Okay.
mentioned at the last meeting.
Well, we'll move on. We'll find somebody else to talk about it.
Okay.
We'll figure that out. Memorial Day Parade. So James is familiar with this from his previous tenure with us, but Jim, you now get to walk with us if you'd like. I know you could walk with the council too, but we have Ray's Float that's
It's green.
growing. So May 28th, did you file the necessary paperwork with Rachel?
Maybe,
All done.
we'll see,
Okay.
I'm busy.
I figured you did. I got the email and I just deleted it. I thought, nah, Ray's already done it. So I know Ellen's not here for the
I may
parade.
not be able to, it just depends
I am
on-
not here for the parade, so there's no sheep in the parade this year, I'm very sorry to say. But
Get a beehive.
get a beehive.
Want a beehive? Okay, yeah.
We
Yep.
still have the paper mache bee,
The paper mache bee needs to come back out.
yeah.
Okay. And Durham Farm Day and Community Picnic.
Yeah, how's that?
So we had a good meeting. Alberto and I met with Rachel. Oh, it's and Suzanne, sorry. Suzanne was there with Rachel Gazowski and Sally Tobias. And we figured out that we'll have this bring your own picnic after Farm Day from 5:30 to 7:30 at Town Landing. And Rachel has secured the necessary approvals from Mike Lynch, and Mike Lynch will also have a porta potty delivered for us there. And Suzanne had a great idea, which would be, it's a bring your own picnic, meet at the landing, kind of rain or shine, and that the Ag Commission would be serving steamed ears of corn as just our contribution, so we could get corn from Emory and TC's and we could be offering that up. So there's a form we need to fill out, a permit application to use town property, and I've got that here and I'll do it. But before I submitted it, I was needing your guys' help on what would we anticipate as number of participants and
Oh my
vehicles?
goodness.
Free food?
No, you're gonna bring
Free
your own
corn.
food this one.
Free corn, that's all you
Free
get.
corn.
We have butter, I guess we have to put that butter. Free
Are
corn
you
and
kidding
butter.
me?
No,
I bet Cabot would donate the butter. They donate it to the Farm Bureau Register.
Oh.
We probably have lots of extra Cabot patties left over at the Grange.
What are you gonna boil it in?
I don't know, we're going to work out the logistics of that.
What would the location be?
Turkey
Town
fryer?
Landing.
Town Landing?
So it will be the,
Build a fire.
what, 6th annual Durham Farm Day and the 1st annual Community Picnic. Farm Day Picnic.
Yeah, I have no idea.
And the reason we chose Old Landing is because it was the only place that had a covered picnic area beside Wagon Hill.
Right. It just made logistically,
That we could do
Downtown
it if it
Central.
rained or anything.
right, yep. So how about we say
Be nice if
50
you could use
participants,
fire.
75? 100? All right.
And does anybody know who's like, anybody has music friends? I did talk to a guy who lives out on Cedar Point who was at the MUB market, who was making music there at the last market. He was up on stage. Do you remember his name?
I do not.
Anyway, I talked to him and I asked him if he would be maybe interested to provide, he just does guitar and
Mhm.
singing, and it's sort of light music. It's not,
Just background.
yeah, I mean, you could listen to him or you could, still talk, in other
Mhm.
words. He said he might be interested, so
Great.
I don't know, but I haven't followed up on it so far, because I wasn't sure if people wanted music or not. But
What do we think? Music in addition
Sure.
to corn?
Yeah, we
Yeah,
agree.
sounds-
Okay.
I don't know how much he charges or any of that, so I was always thinking if any of you are musicians and would like to do it,
Right.
that would also be interesting.
I mean, if we're going back to this Old Time Farm Day, which was Saturday, August 12th, like in, where was it?
UNH.
It was 1978, and they had music, and so we could just, here's a guy playing a banjo here.
And James, this idea came from Alberto. We were brainstorming for Farm Day, and he had a really good observation, which was we send people out around the community all day to check things out, and it would be nice to bring everyone back together at the end of the day. So I think this will be really fun.
And it was also Carol Tuvison who said
Yeah.
she was interested in a hoedown.
A hoedown, right.
Well, that's what
Next
they-
year we'll do the hoedown.
Historically,
Yep.
that's what they did.
So, that sound good? Town Landing, 5:30 to 7:30? We'll be in charge of corn, and we'll have to figure out, how we do
have to
that.
make a poster, we have to probably get on our poster somehow. the
Yes,
information.
and I asked Laura, who works on Harper, who's doing our poster, she's gonna have to make space for that.
Okay,
So maybe at our, June meeting, we can finalize our agenda for the day, and that way I'll know how much space she has.
okay, I'll find out how much the musician would be too.
Okay. Economic development, that's just been a placeholder on there as we've talked with Mary Ellen in the past, and also Sally about ways to have our existing farm businesses, as well as potential ones, just be part of the conversation of economic development in Durham. The farmer's market, it looks like, right, that they've decided to be at Jackson Landing for the summer. And so that will start whatever that first Monday in June is.
Fourth?
I should know that because I'll have to make the banner. June 4th
Yeah.
will be the first one at Jackson Landing. And we're grateful to Todd and others
So
who
we're
tried to
taking all
get them
these
back here
notes.
into town in the parking lot, but maybe next year. The Land Stewardship Subcommittee,
Yep,
John?
very long agenda this time. Meeting was a week ago. We talked about the Doe Farm, which is going to be our site. We're going to have a site walk at the Doe Farm coming up on May 25th. There is also the Doe Farm Committee, as well as the Subcommittee on Land Stewardship. Thompson Forest, it's now called Forest, not Farm. Grand opening in the fall with town ceremonies there. The Oyster River Forest, dealing with trail mowing and such. Wagon Hill Farm, the trails, Little Hale Pond dam removal and restoration, Beards Creek, the drawdown issues surrounding that. And I wanted to point out in particular two things towards the end of the agenda. The Wagon Hill Farm shoreline restoration, the plan is now 98% complete. We've got a $500,000 grant, plus it's between $600,000 and $700,000, I think, that's going to be spent on that. And the interesting aspect of it is that it will be necessary to control or possibly significantly reduce dog activity at Wagon Hill Farm, which will create a lot of discussion, I'm sure.
For the living shoreline part.
Yeah,
So
the
they
living
can't access the
shoreline
water
part.
from everywhere.
But it's a very, very big project. We'll be hearing a lot more about it. And I think that Mike Lynch will be coming possibly to the AgCom. He's coming to a lot of committees, commissions, and boards of town government through the summer to educate everyone on that project. The other thing that came up at the meeting is that theft is rising in the community gardens. Now, I think that's a reference, of course, to last year, not this year. But I don't know if you had any
Who brought that up?
experience of that. I think it might have been Sally Tobias.
You didn't last year, it was the year before,
We
right?
had it the year before.
I know that, I'm aware of that, but I hadn't, we were all left with the idea that it's rising. And obviously, it can't be this year,
Well, we're both in the dark and we were,
okay,
I
but
mean,
you're not,
We've had, various times, we've had issues with theft.
mm,
But our main issue now is theft by deer.
by deer,
Theft
yeah.
by people.
No, this was a, this was a
Haunted.
reference to.
I wouldn't say that's a correct assumption at this point.
Okay, that's good, that should be corrected then. Good. And that's about it. These tend to be very long agendas, not too directly related to agriculture, much more to trails and forests and questions of that sort.
The Thompson Forest, what's the celebration gonna be, just,
Well, essentially, the
they've
grand
logged it.
opening, the trails are ready, the bridges are ready.
Yeah.
The mowing is occurring on the trails on a regular basis through the summer because of the ticks
yeah.
and the fact that people don't want to be walking around in tall grass, that
John?
type of thing.
When will the shoreline protection start in terms of the construction of that?
I think it'll be probably in the autumn of this year.
Okay.
And then very heavy next year. But the education aspect of it will be all summer.
So Mike's coming around to describe what the project
That's right.
entails.
That's right. It's fairly detailed, and there's a lot of money involved in it. It's, there's the $500,000 grant, and I got the idea there might be another 100,000 or so.
Would
in
you
the-
like me
in
to
the
ask
project.
Mike to join us?
Oh, yeah, I'd certainly like to know more about what they have in
Okay.
mind, just
Now,
our
the dog
experience
problem
with.
Wagon Hill, are they concerned about it, pushing it out to the other trails?
Yeah,
Dog problems.
the wear and tear on the trails is certainly a big issue, but also the idea that the dogs may interfere at low tide with the projects.
With the
by-
restoration
By mucking
But
around
like
in
out
the
at
muddy
Dole
areas.
Farm,
and
Are they
so-
afraid that the dogs are gonna be on those trails more than start
Could-
working on the
Could well be,
banks of the
could
Lamprey
well
River?
be, yeah.
Or Thompson Forest? You got the banks of the Lamprey there also.
Yeah,
You start
yeah.
increasing
Although the
dog
use of
traffic.
dogs at Wagon Hill is much more established than
Yeah,
in the
but
other places.
If you start
Restricting them,
restricting
getting them to
that,
the water.
You're gonna push it
There are a lot of
somewhere
dogs that use, people that use the Joe Farm for access to water for their
Mhm.
dogs.
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm. Right.
And Jackson's Landing.
In Jackson's
Yeah.
I
Landing.
have a memory block. Thompson Forest is out of Packers Falls Road?
Wednesday
Yeah.
Hill.
Right at Wednesday
Road.
Hill,
Yes.
a little farther down,
Wednesday Hill.
at the town line almost.
It's past the water theft.
And I think there is a feeling that about 50% of the visitors to Wagon Hill are non-residents.
Yeah,
I don't know where the figure comes from or
It's a
how
good
hard it
figure.
is, but,
it's a good figure.
you know.
Thank you, John.
50%. Thank you.
Community gardens?
We had a work day on Saturday. It's still cold and the soil's still wet, but we've had a great turnout of enthusiasm for people to, they worked hard when they were there. And, yeah, we're getting going.
How many beds?
We have somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 beds with about 65-plus people. Varies because you have spouses.
He's saying slide your mic,
Sorry.
yeah.
Size, the numbers change because you don't know how many people are gardening together, family-wise, so.
That's great.
Oh, we did repair a number of.
10 beds.
10 beds, because the original beds that were originally built the first time by Timberland have finally started to
Fall apart.
become part of the earth once again. So-
We have enough lumber to build about 10 more, and it just depends on the human power that we have for the summer to do that, and plus we can't really interrupt people's growing.
Right.
Right.
We'll have to really
Issues.
wait till the fall, probably, if
Probably,
we do
yeah.
it again, yeah. So.
Thank you. Inventory of farms and gardens.
So Ray gave me his stuff last week. I started trying to put it into the spreadsheet that you had sent, and then I decided I was gonna rework the spreadsheet
Okay.
to make it more user-friendly on the other end. If anybody else has
Not yet.
any
Not yet.
information. But I've been taking notes of any new stuff that I see anywhere.
Yep, me too. I'll get that to you.
Because, with my neighbor across the street, I helped him figure it out and move it in place, and you're never gonna see it 'cause it's behind his house, so.
Yeah.
They're good.
Mhm.
Yeah, those windshield tours are hard when they're
Yeah.
behind their houses.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so.
There are a lot of, I'm seeing a lot more flocks of chickens and a
Yes.
lot of,
Yeah. you
lot
can
of
add
raised
another one
beds
on
and trees.
Packers Falls.
yeah,
There's another chicken coop on Packers Falls now.
like, yeah, they're just everywhere.
McGowan House, they
Yeah.
got chickens now.
Who, the stable?
No,
Oh.
the McGowan
Oh.
House, right next to the road. He's got
Oh, okay.
chickens in the back now.
Because now Bill McGowan, Lindenwood has sheep now,
Yeah.
so. Thank you for taking this on.
I'll do a better job.
James, were we doing this when you were with us last time? Remember?
Yeah, it's one of the first things we
Yeah,
did was
yeah.
an inventory.
So we're updating that.
So I said that I would do like an area of Durham
Mm-hmm.
Point. So I just need to head out and start making notes and sending it to you, or is there a form, or?
Well, I can send you immediately the, what was.
Right.
That's, just so you can see what kind of stuff is there, but I wanna try and work it, like, I'll send you that.
Okay.
So you can see what was already captured in the area where you're gonna look, yeah.
So address and basically what type of stuff's going on. Is it vegetables, are there animals?
And we just use it as a real, just rough estimate, no names, no, we're just doing it to capture, really, it's helping us with that master plan goal of an increase of a certain percentage or number
Yeah.
over a certain.
I gotta
period
wait 2 weeks until I finish my garden,
Yeah,
so.
there you go. Then you can get
Then
your,
I'll do the survey.
Yeah.
But we weren't doing like flower gardens and things like that, just strictly around flower beds around people's houses. It was really if they're actively
Food.
Some kind of
doing
food.
some
Food
kind of
production.
Yeah, it
food
could be
production.
fruit tree, if you can
Be
tell,
fruit
if it's fruit
trees.
trees or
Fruit trees,
blueberries and things like
berries.
that.
Grapes, all that sort of thing.
Yeah, so.
okay, any other business?
I had something I wanted to mention. I have a lot of donated seed packets that I got for something I'm doing at a state, and I wasn't sure if you'd want to use it for your next community gardening gathering to give to anyone that's growing there, or also if you want to give it away on Memorial Day, some of the packets.
We can hand them out.
Yeah.
That might be a really
So I
nice
can
thing
get them
to do.
to,
Yeah.
What seed packets I don't get rid of today, I've been taking to the opening of the farmer's market.
Oh, that's a
good
great
idea
idea.
too, yeah.
They just keep bringing them back, and I don't know what they do in September if they haven't gotten rid of them.
Okay.
But I also like the idea of the Memorial Day parade because we often walk next to the floats.
Yeah, we're
and
right
it would be
walking.
nice to
So
be able to
Wendy
give them to
can-
people.
Are you
as a
walking in
sort
the
of-
parade? Can you walk?
Your Memorial Day.
Okay.
Are they're seed packets that have the directions on them and everything?
There, yeah, that's from High Mowing Seed
Okay,
and Heart.
because sometimes Johnny's doesn't have any directions on them, and some people are
Right.
like, what am I gonna do with
Sometimes,
this?
Johnny, the printing's not even on it.
on these either.
Would you, if Renee can't be at the parade, if she got the seeds to you, to Suzanne, and then she could?
I'm coming to the parade,
Yeah,
so-
great, thank you.
You know where I live, I
I
think.
have your number.
Yeah, yeah,
Is
great,
there any other business?
I think so.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Well, all those in favor of adjourning? Aye. Thank you, everybody.